Hello, crafters and artisans, and welcome back to Psychedelic Squid Fiber Arts. Today, I'm going to define some wool jargon, specifically terminology used to describe the condition of raw wool fleeces. The terms I'll be covering today are staple length, crimp, micron, comfort factor, prickle factor, skirtings, skirted, seconds, second cuts, yoke, canary staining, felted, cotted, break, tender, weak tips, sun-bleached, vegetable matter, and coated versus uncoated. Starting with staple length. Staple length is the length of wool fiber typically determined in inches. The length is taken from locks of wool at rest, not stretched out. Usually, they take a few locks from different spots across the fleece to get an average or a range. So you'll see staple lengths in ranges, sometimes like 3 to 4 inches. Crimp is the waviness or springiness of the individual hairs. So while a super crimpy fleece might have a staple length of 3 inches, the individual hairs could be 5 inches long. Crimp adds to the fluffiness and airiness of the wool and final product. Typically, super crimpy wools make yarns that are very good at retaining heat. Micron is the measurement of the diameter of the individual hairs of the sheep. Micron is just short for micrometers. Typically, this is tested at a specialized facility. Wool with micron ratings of 12 to 20 are usually comfortable when worn against the skin. Wool with microns over 30 are usually uncomfortable. Which leads to the next term, comfort factor. The comfort factor is the percentage of individual hairs that are less than 30 microns in diameter. The opposite percentage of hairs that are thicker than 30 microns is referred to the prickle factor. This term isn't used often as it's literally just the inverse of the comfort factor. Skirtings. Sometimes you'll find great deals on wool because they're skirtings. However, skirtings are the undesirable parts of the wool that have been removed from the main fleece as the first step of processing a fleece. Skirtings are typically from the face, neck, legs, butt, and stomach. Skirted refers to a fleece that has had the undesirable parts removed. Depending on individual preference, people remove more or less quantities of wool. Some people will just remove the belly, legs, and poo tags. Others will remove areas with high amounts of debris or discoloration or odd crimp patterns. Sometimes, when people remove still usable portions of a fleece, they will sell them as seconds. They're usually the better parts of the wool that have been skirted off, or portions of the main fleece that were lower in quality that the person doing the skirting didn't want to process with the main fleece. However, quality of the seconds is subjective. I also typically only see this used to describe alpaca or llama. Second cuts refer to something entirely different than seconds. Second cuts occur in pretty much every fleece. The first time a shearer passes over the skin of the animal is the first cut, but due to the curves of the animal, the hair is usually cut at a slight angle. When the shearer passes over the first cut again, or the second time, it creates these super short lengths of wool referred to as second cuts. Novice shearers typically have more second cuts that can be quite long, and that directly subtracts from the staple length. Professional shearers will usually make few and extremely short second cuts. Yoke refers to the discoloration or residue found on the fleece of yearling sheep or year-old sheep. Some yearling fleeces don't have this because the sheep was sheared after the yoke hair grew out. However, yoke is typically a mild yellow discoloration that usually washes out during processing. Now, canary staining should not be confused with yoke. Canary staining is usually a deep yellow stain that is caused from a parasitic infection on the sheep. It does not wash out. Usually the wool's integrity doesn't suffer, so stained wool can still be used and dyed to hide the yellow. Yoke staining is usually mild and washes out, but the yoke-colored wool can sometimes be weakened compared to the rest of the length of the fiber. Canary staining usually doesn't affect the integrity of the fleece, but if you see this, you should let the person you got the wool from know so they can treat the sheep. Both of these are usually noticed during shearing. Some fleeces may look yellow due to the oxidation of the wool grease, also known as lanolin. Felted fleeces are sometimes sold for rug making. If a fleece is felted, it means the wool has fused together into a solid mass and can't be undone. Felting occurs from the scales on the individual hairs of the wool hooking and entangling each other. Some wool breeds felt easier than others. Cotted is usually used to refer to mild felting, such as cotted tips. This term is held in a bit of contention, as some may say cotted is another word for felted, while some say cotted means it can be combed or carded out. If someone is using the word cotted to describe a fleece, I would ask for clarification. A break in the wool refers to a weakness along the length of the individual hairs where it'll snap or break during processing. This usually happens when an individual sheep has a stressful event, got ill, or sometimes simply had a change in feed. Typically, people will show exactly where the break is so you know what length the final fiber will be. A tender fleece is one that also has a weak spot or is weak throughout the length of the fiber, but it might survive a gentle hand processing. This is also subjective. I've successfully processed a few tender fleeces, but sometimes they're too fragile and fall apart during combing. Weak tips refers to a weakness or break near the tip of the fiber. It can happen from the yoke, sun damage, or wear. Sometimes this is also referred to as a tippy fleece. Sun-bleached usually refers to sun-bleached tips. It's fairly common in colored fleeces. The sun damages the ends, and they'll usually lighten to a lighter brown or orange. VM, or vegetable matter, sometimes known as barn glitter, refers to organic matter found in and on the fleece. This can be hay, seed pods, poo, grass, feed, or etc. It's usually the most severe in the face, head, neck region, the legs, the belly, and the butt, which contributes to why these sections get skirted out. The quantity and the bulk of the fleece is usually described as mild, moderate, or severe. The severity is subjective to each individual. What I might think is moderate, someone else might think is severe. Coated versus uncoated. Some farmers will literally put coats on their sheep to prevent sun damage and reduce the amount of vegetable matter collected. It's a time-consuming process as the coats have to routinely be resized as the wool grows out. If the farmer doesn't do this as often as needed, it can lead to cotted or felted tips. So, coated fleeces typically are a bit more expensive. And that's it for today's wool jargon. Please let me know if you have any other questions in the comments section below, and feel free to visit my Facebook page or Instagram to ask clarifying questions or about things I haven't covered yet. Thank you all so much for exploring the depths of your creativity, and I'll see you next time.